Ronin Man here. There's I don't know if you've been hearing about this data breach from Equifax, but 150 million people had their credit records leaked on the internet, and it's leaked. It's their credit history, their data, everything, and also their name connected, right? So basically, everybody is fucked. So when your credit records are on the internet, what people can do is they can get a credit card in your name. They can start to buy things. They can do all kinds of stuff that ruins your credit, and there's no way for you to stop it really, because they're using your name. They have your data, right? So it puts you in a very difficult position. There's some things you can do to protect yourself, but they're basically lame. There's not much you can do. That's the whole frustrating thing about this, right? So now we got this leak of 150 million people, and I was looking at this, and there was something that smelled wrong about this from the beginning. So I looked into it a little more. So here we go. This is Market Watch, very reliable website here, and Equifax hired a music major as chief security officer, and she has just retired. Okay. So Sarah Malden, whose identity is being scrubbed from the internet, studied music composition. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are very aware of affirmative action. So affirmative action is trying to get women and minorities hired in place of white males, right? So that's a common thing. And so what I think's happened is over the years, we have so many people now telling companies who to hire that it has finally come to fruition, where we're seeing massive problems, and it's directly related to hiring the wrong people. Now, in this case, we got this poor guy here, which you got to feel sorry for him. Look at his face, right? Okay, so this is Richard Smith, the CEO of Equifax, right? So basically, he's going in front of Congress because they're going to grill the shit out of this guy for data security, right? And now there's a cover-up. They're covering up Susan Malden's lack of educational qualifications, right? So they're blaming it on him, and they're really going to town blaming it on him, right? And they're going to try to ruin this guy's career. So if these events don't put the final nails in his professional coffin, accountability in the U.S. is officially dead, according to this article. Now, this is complete bullshit, because we know exactly why this woman was hired. This woman was hired because of affirmative action. Companies are under intense pressure to hire non-white male employees. And so even if you have, it's the same situation you have with Asian students getting very high grades, and so they are weighing it against high-scoring Asian students who study their ass off, right? And they're giving it to people that didn't study as hard and didn't get as good grades, right? Because they were on top, right? So what we have now in the security, and this is very relevant because the Google security memo basically warned us about this very thing, is that women don't study tech as much. They don't study mathematics as much. And so there's not as many people to choose from. So you got companies hiring second-rate security people because they just simply don't. They have to hire a certain percentage of females and males and everything. They got to hire. They have a million things they have to think about before they even think about qualifications. If you don't think that affects the final outcome, you are out of your mind. I worked in HR. I worked in recruiting, and it's a form of HR. It's much more high powered. But what we did in recruiting is we had to find top candidates for companies like this, and they were willing to pay us a huge amount of money to find these candidates. We got between 35% and 25% of their yearly salary for finding people in this to fill a need. And the reason is because it's very difficult to find good people for top positions. So difficult positions is very difficult. it's easy. You don't see recruiters, headhunters, working on college grads because it's easy to find college grads. Whatever you want to find, if you want half women, if you want half men, it's easy. There's tons of them, right? But if you want qualified people in the middle of their career, midstream, who fit the exact profile that you're looking for, it can be very difficult. And that's why they're willing to pay recruiters 35% of the guy's yearly salary, a huge amount of money for a successful hire. So it's a great business, very profitable business. And I would say in this situation, as a professional recruiter myself, which I was a recruiter for 8 years, and I know the business very well, had my own company, and I can say this, that when you're recruiting, okay, here's another thing you got to think about in a company like Equifax. Equifax is a credit history company, right? Now, when you're hiring, okay, let's say when I'm doing a search, when I'm searching for a candidate, the type of company I'm searching for affects the candidates I can find. So if I'm looking for a very hot company in a very hot niche, then it's easy to find good people. And so my job at that time was to find more people and then to whittle them down to the top 3 and introduce those top 3, and then they would hire the one that they like. And if they didn't like any of them, I would go and find another 3 and bring them in, right? But the thing is it very much, the company that you're searching for affects the quality and how much the candidates want to join the company. So for example, if I'm doing a search for Google and for a security officer, there's going to be a lot of people who want to work for Google because it's a very attractive company. It looks great on the resume, right? And if you're anytime you have the top company in a niche, they always are like the easiest to find good people for. Now, anytime that you have a kind of a company that's on the side, it's not so popular, then it's more difficult. Now, if you're looking for, for example, in Equifax, if you're looking for people in the credit history area, then Equifax is interesting. You can get top candidates. But when you're looking for a security expert for a company like this, they're not so excited about a company like this. They want to be security for a famous company that's famous for security, right? That's more attractive to the candidates. So basically, a long way of saying is that one, I know what I'm talking about with this topic, but two, also, is that Equifax, a company like Equifax, has a difficult time finding top quality person for something that's not their main business. It's not their line of business. It's a side thing. Security in a credit company, it's not a sexy position, right? So it's difficult to find people. Now, on top of this, if you start to weed out candidates that are qualified because they're male, or because they were a certain race, and you start weeding out candidates, and you're trying to find women to fill the role, you're really in the bottom of the barrel then. And look what happened in this case. And I can pretty much there's no way to prove anything like this. Okay, there's no proof. All I can do is present you with the facts. You draw the conclusions, right? Okay, so what I can say in this article is they're trying to pin everything on this, the guy who is the CEO, right? Now, the chief security officer is that Susan I was talking about. She has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, fine arts in music composition from the University of Georgia, right? And her LinkedIn profile has been taken down. It's been made private. And I tell you something, there is something really weird about this, really fucking weird. This is the one thing I found doing the research on this one that was really weird. Here I am on the Wayback Machine. I don't know if you guys know this one. It's waybackmachine.org. And every website in the world is backed up here. So, for example, if there's an article online and somebody takes it down, or let's say a site, like there's a guy with a website, and then he decides to, the domain expires and the site goes down, stops paying his host or whatever, right? Well, you can go to Wayback Machine. You can always see whatever was up there. So it's very useful. Anytime there's like a news article that's been changed, you can always go back and see the original by going to the Wayback Machine. You just put the link there in the bar, and you can see. Usually there's hundreds of snapshots, exact records of what that website used to look like. But look at Susan Malden. There's nothing. This has been cleaned. This is her LinkedIn profile. This should have hundreds, if you know, should have hundreds of records, like most websites would have. Any LinkedIn profile has a history, you know, unless the person, it's their first time, they're 22 years old and they're getting their first LinkedIn account. But anybody who's a professional is going to have, in fact, if you want to test yours, just take your LinkedIn profile and put it in here, put it in the Wayback Machine, waybackmachine.org, and you can see there's going to be those little black lines you see on the right there. You're going to see a lot of these little black lines, and you click on them and you're going to see an exact screenshot of what your profile looked like at that day, back in 2013, 2007, whatever it is, right? So it's very cool. And the fact that her stuff is in here, it's not just weird, it's absolutely a conspiracy. I mean, it's absolutely, they took it down. Now, maybe because of some lawsuit, I don't know. I don't know the reason. All I can say is that I've never, ever seen this. And I use the Wayback Machine all the time. Whenever I'm doing research, I want to see what it looked like before. So you can't fool anybody, because if you say you said something, they can always go back and look, and they can say, he didn't say that. She didn't say that. It's easy to see. Now, so somebody cleaned the records, not only cleaned and made her profile private, but they cleaned the fucking web archive. That's intense. That's intense. Now, luckily, I was able to find a record of this woman's LinkedIn profile for you. So here she is, Susan, Chief Security Officer at Equifax, University of Georgia. She has, looks like she started in 2013, and she's got some other data. She was a security for data for banks. I saw somewhere else that she was actually a security officer for First Data, and I think the bank too. I'm not sure about Hewlett Packard, but basically here's her professional qualifications for being a security officer. She was a BA in music composition, and she was an MFA in music composition. Now, let's go ahead and find. Where was that? Oh, geez. Oh man, where was it? I don't have it. I'm sorry, I don't have the link right here. But basically, it was a link I just read. I can put the link in the comment box. But they asked her before. There was an interview of her transcribed online, and it was obviously before the data breach. And they said, you know, like, how do you hire people for security? And then she said, well, we hire this and that and this and that. Of course, she didn't mention music, but she mentioned all these unqualified people. And then she said, luckily, she said, security can be taught. Now, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, literally, that is one of the stupidest comments I've ever read from a professional. Like, I've never heard this kind of stuff before. There's certain things that can be learned. You can, like, let's say that you're a professional, you're professional in music. And you're learning a new song. Of course, you can learn a new song, right? And if you can play 10 instruments, you can learn a new instrument, right? Because you have the basics down: reading music, chords, timing, singing. You can do a lot of stuff, but you need to learn the instrument. That's things that can be learned. Those are things that can be learned, and certain things can be learned, right? But your profession as a security officer, to say that can be learned is really crazy. I mean, it's like saying you can be the chief executive officer with no experience because it can be learned. That's just stupid. This woman is stupid. I mean, that's the only thing you can say, is that she is just downright an idiot. Like, I'm not surprised that this data breach happened on her watch. I mean, just saying something like that. This is her main business. She's hiring people for security, and she's saying that it can be learned. You have to. I mean, just to give you an idea of how weird this is I like I said, I did search for 8 years. I did all kinds of searches for mostly IT, mostly software, and some hardware, and some finance, and some retail. But in my searches, our job was to find qualified candidates, and it was very difficult. I had to go through at least 1,000 resumes, at least fairly qualified resumes, before I could find even like 5 or 10 reasonably close ones, right? And then I would go with these 10 and I would call them and I would talk to them. I would do an interview on the phone, see if they sound good. If they sound good, then I would ask them to come to my office, and I would try to do 20 interviews if I could, physical interviews, like 1 hour interviews, so 20 hours of meeting people in person. Then I would take notes, and out of those 20, I would look for 3 of the top ones, right? And I would always look for, so for example, if I was looking for chief security officer at Equifax with key data on, Americans' security, data that's just super valuable because you can steal someone's credit, you can steal someone's identity with this. I would only look in other companies for chief security officers that have, they've gone to the best schools, they have the training, they have all the latest licenses, they've been doing it for 10, 15 years. Like to get hired as a chief, you got to be pretty damn good. It's no joke. Like our job was tough. Like it was tough to find good people. I would call in a lot of people, and then when they came into my office, I would always treat them, well. I would not let them know if I didn't think they were any good. But most people aren't good, right? If you're going to look for the top 1, 2, 3%, which is what we were looking for, you need to go through the other 97. Like that's it. There's no other way around it. You have to reject 90%, 97% of people that are in that position. Okay, I'm not talking about 97% of people. If you talk about the percentage of people, you're talking about almost 100, like 99.99999, then 9's all the way down for the rest of the week. Okay, because you're looking for a very specific person, right? So in this case, we have someone who's a music person who was on the record saying she hires non-security people, and she said they can learn security. So I think the only thing I can say about this is, this is a breaking news right now, is that there has to be some debate about whether this was due to affirmative action. I think it's too easy to blame it on the officer, the CEO. This is the easiest thing to do, is just to say, this CEO should be fired, right? Because he hired a woman who is not even slightly qualified for a position that anybody listening to this podcast, if you're in North America, probably your data was released. So you're gonna have to check your security. You're gonna have to check your credit rating for the rest of your life because of this woman. This is a serious breach. This is like a real thing that affects so many people. It affects you. It affects anybody who has any money, right? And this is stressing me out. I have to figure out how I'm going to deal with this. And it's just really depressing to see that this basically came down to a affirmative action thing and hire, and I think we just, we got the warning from the Google guy. We got the warning. The canary in the coal mine was the Google guy, because if you go back and read his memo was really not, it wasn't offensive. If you read it, it's like it's benign stuff. It really isn't like people are saying. Like really, I would say if it was, it's not. It's very benign, and a lot of people inside Google agree with it, and a lot of women that are engineers are making videos now on YouTube agreeing with it, right? So it's just the idea, the fantasy land that we live in is that everybody's the same. Is that men, wear pink and wear dresses just as much as women. Women study mathematics, are data scientists. We have I did a previous podcast on the fake data scientist that's now giving talks at TED. So we got fake data scientists that are leading the field now. They don't have any experience in data science. Now we have security officers with some of the most sensitive data in America being run by women that write music, right? And then when there's a problem, we have people blaming the company, the people that hired them. The guy that hired them is not in charge of the laws that are like clamping down on hiring and making it very difficult to hire, qualified staff. It's basically, here's the deal. Anytime you get in the way of a company hiring the best person, you are fucking that company really bad. And the government has been doing this for years, and they're basically still trying to wiggle out of it as if there is no effect, as if it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And we're looking here at this fiasco, which affects you, which affects me, and which affects pretty much all working age Americans and Canadians, right? So I don't know, like, when is this going to stop? When is somebody going to say that government regulating who can be hired without any knowledge of the candidates, just like putting a blanket rule about it, is not acceptable? I mean, when are we going to stand up and say that this is fucking bullshit? You know, when are we going to say that hiring somebody like this for a sensitive job, you know, and when are we going to stop listening to intelligent, articulate Google's data scientists who are saying, that there's just not enough women? It's like, he doesn't have any problem with hiring women. It's just there's not enough. They don't go into data science enough. They don't go into mathematics enough. Like, you can see, right, there's 70% of teachers are women. You know, women like to go into the teaching profession by and large. I'm not talking about you if you're listening, and I'm not saying if you're a guy you don't go into teaching. I'm saying, like, by and large, right? 70% teachers are women, right? There's certain fields men and women gravitate towards, right? I went into business, right? My sister did not, right? And my brother went into an engineering field, right? So, you know, it's you just have to look at the real world. You know, it's just not, it would be fine if the world was this way. It would be fucking fine. I mean, I'll tell you something. I tell you something I came across in Japan when I was recruiting. I was interviewing engineers once, and I had a lot of people come in. I was calling engineer after an engineer for this specific position. And there was a woman, and I called her in, and she came in, and she was actually pretty cute. I was surprised, and she came in, and she was an engineer, and she was a woman, and she was quite talkative and friendly. And I asked her, I said, and again, I am not making a rule here. I'm talking my experience, okay? I interviewed every engineer I could for this position, okay? I called everybody I could, and I was really happy to get a woman. I was like, yes, because I knew she'd have a greater chance of getting hired too, because the companies are always happy to see a female engineer because it's so hard to find, right? This is the real world, guys. This is not some fucking fantasy land, right? So I found this woman. I'm like, yes, yeah. So she comes in. Plus, she's attractive and she's friendly. I'm like, awesome. And I said, how did you get into engineering? Why did you decide to get to engineering? You know what she told me? Her story was really interesting. She said, actually, I didn't. She said, I came in. She had another degree. I don't forget what it was, humanities or something. She came into the company, and the president really took a shine to her, which I could see because this person was very friendly and she was cute. You know, you could she was bubbly. You could see why he would do this. But either way, he trained her to be an engineer. The president himself at this Japanese company had trained her. He had taken a shine to her. He had made sure she got trained, even though she wasn't an engineer. And every other engineer in the company had an engineering degree. She did not. He trained her, put a lot of time into her. And so I said, okay. And I introduced her to a company, but she didn't like the position, so she didn't take it. Well, then, a year later or whatever, there was another company looking for somebody. But they weren't looking for an engineer. They were looking for somebody like her, same kind of personality. And I said, hey, I know somebody. Her English is really good. She's working as an engineer now, but I think you should talk to her, And so I called her in, and I introduced her to the company. And she did join the company. And I did eventually get paid. But the interesting thing was when I met her again, I said, hey, you joined that company, like the president personally took you aside to train you. And I said, didn't that kind of hurt him? And like he took you aside, you weren't even qualified. And she said, yeah. That really pissed him off. She's like, yeah, that was not good for him. She burned the guy who helped her, right? And I also asked her too. I said, what is it like when you go to a company? I said, what is it like? Do you feel, because this is Japan, right? This is Japan over 20 years ago. I said, look, what does it feel like? I wanted to know, because when I'm interviewing people, I interview them for like an hour. It gets very personal. I want to know a lot about them before I introduce them. when I was recruiting. I was a good recruiter, and I wanted to know like a deep level how they react to things, their personality, how they think, how they got to where they are, how they were successful. Was it something they can recreate, something they can reproduce, or was it one-time thing like pure luck or whatever, So I always try to find out more about them, and we have a lot of discussion. And I say, what's it like to go to a company in Japan as a female engineer? Is it difficult? I was like, is it difficult? Like, do they treat you bad because you're a woman? She goes, oh no. She goes, geez. She goes, like, there's a waiting list for me to come to companies because everybody wants me to come. They don't want these fucking greasy guys to come in. They want me to come in, And so she said, like, getting an appointment with a client is like super easy because she was very in demand. And I was laughing because I was like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, she was attractive, and there's not very many female engineers in Japan, and so but that was her story. She got a special hand up from the president, and she screwed him over. If that company would have been trying to hire female engineers, it'd be difficult, right? It's difficult. When you ask this Equifax company to hire 50% females in technological roles, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get Susan Malden, right? This is what you're going to get. You're going to get music majors who believe that they can learn their profession on the job. It's very similar to like a pilot saying, you don't really need a pilot's license, because with a pilot's license, all you need to do, you can learn to fly on the job. Just get behind the airplane and start flying, right? It's no problem, right? It's you can learn on the job. You can do surgery on the job. You don't need to go to school. You just have to get in there, get your knife, start cutting away, look for the things that you're looking for, tie things up, It's all good. You don't really need to be trained doctor, And we do, but the thing you do need is you need 50% women no matter what. So don't worry, about that too much, because people are flexible. They can learn their own profession, the main thing they're doing. They can learn that on the job, and this is where we're at right now. In any field where women are, it's a high-paying field. In a low-paying field, then you don't have to hire women. So, for example, if you're doing or a hard, dangerous job. So if you're doing like a death penalty person, if you're doing a jail guard, if you're doing a jail guard might not be a good example. If you're doing like a road work people like mining, you don't need to hire half women for that. That's fine. You can hire all men. That's totally fine. And if you're doing military deaths, it's totally fine to have all men. But if you're hiring a chief security officer with a high-paying job, then you have to hire half women. So keep this in mind, guys. When you're hiring, if it's dangerous, low-paying, or miserable that nobody wants to do, then you can hire all men, right? And then you're gonna but if you're gonna hire for these kind of jobs that are good jobs, kick-ass jobs, you have to hire women even if they're not qualified. And this is what we're getting. And again, I don't want to belabor it too much, but I mean, I worked in recruiting. I worked in staffing. I understand this business very fucking well. And I can tell you that it's not easy. It's a difficult business. It's difficult to find the right candidate for this position, right? You have to go through a lot of people. And anytime when I was doing it, we didn't have to hire men or women in Japan. There was no law about that. So we just found the most attractive candidate. And it was goddamn hard. Like sometimes positions wouldn't get filled. There would be a position that was just too hard to fill. It was difficult. You couldn't find anybody that was good enough to fill this position. So companies would have unfilled positions. That was a common thing. Like in those kind of positions, nobody wanted to work on because you knew they were hard, right? You're like, oh man, this thing's been open for a year. Like, fuck that, right? I'm not going to work on this one, right? So the business is not easy. And anytime that you put some barriers to success in the way of people, you're basically fucking yourself and you're fucking the company. And in this case, you're fucking all the Americans. So, hello to the new world, guys. You can be a music major if you're female. Look down between your legs. If there's a penis there, you can't do it. But if there isn't a penis there, then you can be a music major and you can be in charge of data for basically the most sensitive data. You can learn on the job. You don't need to have any kind of qualifications. You can learn on the job, and then when you fuck up, and you have a huge fuck up, people are going to cover it up for you. Even like websites like Wayback Machine will clean it up for you so that you don't get in trouble, and so that the affirmative action program is protected. We got to protect that, and you can't blame that. That's just the way it is. You can blame the guy who hired her. That's the easy way. That's the simple way. Let's blame the guy who hired her. Let's not talk about why he hired her or who he didn't hire and why he didn't hire them. That's what I would like to hear this guy say. I'd like to see this guy go in front of Congress and say, hey, what the fuck, I had tons of candidates that were very fucking qualified, but they were white males, they were black males, they were fucking males, they were Hispanic males, they were not women, and you wanted women, and there were no women who were security experts who wanted to work for Equifax, and so I hired a music major, and nobody complained about it until all the data was lost. And now you're going to go back and you're going to say, hey, that I hired her. Hey, I hired her my ass. I did what I had to do. You caused the problem. And so I think that the MRAs get on this one, because the security and tech is one of the most important things for us today. Privacy data is key. And if we continue down this road, we're not listening to the Google guy. We're not listening to engineers who are working in the business. And we're saying that, you can do it, right? Instead we're like platitudes, like the Women in World Summit, right? The price of hurting the womb of humanity, women and girls, is a high price to pay for everybody, right? It's a high price to pay, right? Not losing all the data. Just because you're polite doesn't mean you can't be strong. Art raises awareness. Yeah, let's see, what's the next one? Trauma fuels strength. Empathy breaks down barriers. Yeah. So this is what we get instead of the glass can never be half full. Yeah. We need to change the way women are portrayed in media, right? Yeah, we don't need to hire men. Yeah, and then we can put this picture here of naked women, we can put that there. That's fine. And we must battle bro culture. We had men calling us saying, you can't do this. You don't know what you're doing. You're not capable of pulling off something of this magnitude. And so you should bring us on board. And that's a bro culture thing to say, according to this woman. It's a bro culture to say that she can't do it. That she's not qualified. I tell you something, it is not bro culture. No, it is intelligence saying that she can't do it. It's intelligence. And intelligence needs to be respected. And qualifications need to be respected. And tech, engineering, mathematics, they should be male dominated because they're male dominated in studies, they're male dominated in tests, and until they are female dominated based on statistics, okay, not based on affirmative action, if they are based on statistics, of course you hire women, you dumb fuck. If women are better at math, if they're inventing stuff, if they're doing stuff, of course you hire women. Of course. No, this is not a pro man thing. I'm just saying right now, if you're hiring somebody and you're being forced to hire somebody who ain't good, this is what you're going to get, boys. This is it. This is the brave new world we're in. And even after all this happened, nobody is saying what I'm saying right here. Nobody. Everybody is just saying, fucking sue Equifax. The president has to go. He has to go. He has to go. Right? Bring in a she. Yeah. There you go. You figured it all out. All done. It's all solved now. You can get rid of him too. And then you can raise the females. And you got females on the board. You got females in the security position. And don't bother looking at the qualifications. Don't worry about that. There's no law about that. There's a law about who you can hire. But there's not a law about qualifications. So feel free to hire anybody you want. and just put them in any position, and let's just continue on, boys. Don't stop here. There's nothing to look at. It's all good. All right, Ronin Man signing off. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys, all your comments and all your awesome fucking emails and everything. I'm gonna have a blockbuster video out tomorrow. So either way, I'm gonna hit the sack, and thanks for watching.